Security laughs at transgender teen, then a well-known advocate changes the rules. How will this story escalate? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. The mall was bustling with the weekend crowd, people moving between stores, chatting, laughing, living their lives without a second thought. But for Ryan, this wasn't just another Saturday. It was supposed to be a simple day. Grab a coffee, check out the new bookstore, maybe even enjoy some window shopping. But things were never that simple for him. Ryan adjusted his backpack, breathing in deeply as he walked through the entrance. He had done this 100 times before, but today, the weight of being seen felt heavier. The security guard at the front, a man in his late 40s with a broad frame and a name tag that read Miller, barely glanced at most people. But the second Ryan stepped through, Miller's expression changed. His eyes flickered over Ryan. His clothes, his short hair, the way he carried himself. There was an assessing glance, followed by something Ryan had seen too many times before. Disapproval. Miller's lips curled into something that was almost a smirk. "Hey kid," he said, stepping forward. "Hold up a second." Ryan's stomach dropped, but he forced himself to stand tall. "Yeah." Miller crossed his arms. "I need to see some ID." Ryan frowned. "I've never been asked for ID here before." Miller shrugged. "Well, now I'm asking." People walked past, oblivious to the scene unfolding. Ryan felt his fingers clench around the strap of his backpack. "I'm not doing anything wrong," he said carefully. Miller chuckled, shaking his head. "Look, I don't have time for this. Just show me your ID, and if everything checks out, you can go." Ryan hesitated. He knew exactly where this was going. It always went the same way. He could either walk away, let Miller have his little moment of authority, or he could stand his ground. Ryan reached into his back pocket and pulled out his ID, handing it over with a tight jaw. Miller took one look at it and immediately snorted. Ryan's whole body tensed. Miller laughed, holding up the card as if it were some kind of joke. "So, Ryan?" His smirk widened. "Funny, that's not what it says here." Ryan felt the air vacuum out of his lungs. This wasn't just about checking an ID. This was humiliation. The guard didn't even try to hide it. His chuckle grew louder, drawing attention from a few passers-by who looked over but kept walking, too wrapped up in their own lives to get involved. Ryan burned inside. He knew that laugh. He knew that look. It was the same one he had seen too many times before. But this time, he wasn't going to let it happen. Ryan straightened his back. "Give it back." Miller didn't move. "Relax, kid. I'm just trying to understand." "Give." But Miller smirked again, clearly enjoying the power he had over the situation. "Come on, don't be so sensitive. Is there a problem here?" The new voice cut through the tension like a blade. Miller's amusement vanished instantly. Ryan turned and felt his heart stop. Because standing there, in a sharp navy suit, was someone he had only ever seen on TV and social media. Jordan Carter. The advocate. The speaker. The man who had taken on lawsuits, changed policies, and fought for people like Ryan when no one else would. And now? Now he was standing right there. Miller cleared his throat. "Oh, sir. Just doing routine checks." Jordan raised an eyebrow. "Routine checks?" His voice was steady, unreadable. "Is that right, Ryan?" Ryan swallowed hard, feeling his pulse in his ears. He glanced at Miller, then back at Jordan. Every fiber of his being told him to just let it go. Not to make it worse. But then he remembered, it wasn't him making it worse. He took a breath. He asked for my ID. I gave it to him. Then he laughed at it. Jordan's expression didn't change, but the energy shifted. Miller's confidence cracked, just slightly. Look, I was just checking. We have policies." "Policies?" Jordan tilted his head. "Policies that include mocking a teenager over his identity?" Miller's mouth opened, then shut again. He glanced around, realizing that more people were watching now. Ryan stood still, heart pounding, unable to believe what was happening. And for the first time in a long time, he felt something different. Miller's smirk had vanished completely. The once confident security guard was now shifting on his feet, suddenly aware that the balance of power had changed. Jordan Carter wasn't just some random bystander. He was a name that carried weight. A name that had shut down discriminatory policies in schools. A name that had forced corporations to change their hiring practices. A name that had exposed businesses for the way they treated people like Ryan. And Miller? Miller had just put himself directly in the firing line. Ryan felt the energy shift, but he still wasn't sure if he should trust it. He had spent too many years being brushed aside, ignored, told he was overreacting. Jordan turned fully toward Miller now, his stance calm but firm. "You said you were just following policy?" Miller cleared his throat. "Yeah. We check IDs if something seems off." Jordan's expression remained unreadable. "And what exactly seemed off about Ryan?" Miller hesitated. "Look, I don't mean anything by it." Jordan held up a hand, cutting him off. "That's not what I asked." His voice was steady, controlled. "Dangerous. What exactly made you stop Ryan? And don't tell me it's policy, because I've watched you let dozens of people walk in without a second glance." Miller's face flushed slightly. He looked around, realizing more people were paying attention. Ryan's heart pounded in his chest. This wasn't just a passing moment anymore. This was becoming something bigger. Miller swallowed. It's just a precaution, all right?" Jordan's eyes narrowed. "A precaution against what?" Miller exhaled sharply, clearly flustered now. "Look, man, I don't make the rules. Jordan took a step forward. "But you do enforce them, don't you?" His voice was quiet, but the weight behind it was undeniable. "And tell me, Miller, do you enforce them equally?" Silence. Miller's jaw tightened. "I don't have to answer this." Jordan smiled, but there was no warmth behind it. "Actually, you do." And just like that, he pulled out his phone. Miller's face drained of color. Ryan's breath hitched. He knew exactly what was happening. Jordan wasn't just calling him out, he was documenting it. Miller's hands twitched at his sides. "You're seriously making a big deal out of this?" Jordan didn't look up from his phone. "You made it a big deal the moment you decided to laugh at this kid's identity." Ryan's chest tightened. The way Jordan said it, this kid, felt like a shield. Like someone was standing between him and the fire for the first time in his life. Miller swallowed again. He was trapped and he knew it. "Look, I'll just give him his ID back, all right?" Jordan nodded. "That's a start. But we're not done." Ryan's breath caught as Miller hesitated, then begrudgingly pulled out his wallet and handed back the ID. His fingers were tense, his jaw locked. But Ryan didn't care. He took it back and shoved it into his pocket, suddenly feeling lighter. Jordan slid his phone away, tilting his head. "Now, tell me, Miller, what do you think is going to happen next?" Miller's jaw twitched. "I don't. Because here's what I think," Jordan continued. "I think we're about to have a very public conversation about mall policies and who they really serve." Miller opened his mouth, but Jordan wasn't finished. "I also think this mall doesn't want a lawsuit." He glanced down at the security badge clipped to Miller's belt. "And I think your boss is going to be very interested in hearing about how you treat teenagers who are just trying to exist." Ryan felt something stir in his chest, something he hadn't felt before. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the one left powerless. Miller took a step back, suddenly looking unsure. "All right, let's not blow this out of proportion." Jordan arched an eyebrow. "Not blowing this out of proportion would have been you treating Ryan like everyone else." Miller swallowed. I'll talk to my supervisor." Jordan nodded, stepping to the side. "You do that. In the meantime, Ryan and I are going to walk into this mall without another issue. And if you try stopping him again..." He smiled, but there was nothing friendly about it. "You're going to be trending for all the wrong reasons." Miller hesitated, but in the end he stepped aside. Ryan's heart pounded as Jordan turned to him, his expression softening. "You all right?" Ryan nodded, even though he wasn't sure. Because for the first time, someone had stood up for him. And won. Jordan smiled, gesturing toward the entrance. "Let's go." And just like that, they walked past the security desk. No hesitation. No apologies. Ryan stepped into the mall with his head held high. Because today the rules had changed. Ryan walked beside Jordan, his heart still hammering in his chest. The weight of what had just happened wasn't lost on him. He had spent years being told to keep his head down, to not draw attention, to let things slide. But today, someone had fought back for him. They moved through the mall, past the stores and food court, past groups of shoppers who had no idea that something huge had just happened outside. Ryan still felt the residual tension in his muscles, his body caught between the instincts to run and the realization that he didn't have to. Jordan glanced at him. "You sure you're okay?" Ryan nodded quickly. "Yeah, I think so." Jordan smirked, but there was kindness behind it. "You handled yourself well back there." Ryan let out a small breath. "I didn't do anything." Jordan stopped walking and turned to face him fully. "Yes, you did. You stood there. You didn't shrink. You demanded respect." He paused, then added, "That's not nothing." Ryan swallowed. He had never thought of it like that. All he had felt in the moment was powerless. But maybe standing his ground had been something. He looked up at Jordan, hesitating. "How do you do it?" Jordan raised an eyebrow. "Do what?" "Not let people like him get to you," Ryan muttered. "Not let it make you feel small." Jordan exhaled, nodding slightly as if he understood the weight of that question. "It used to get to me," he admitted, "for a long time. But I learned something." Ryan waited, watching him closely. Jordan smiled slightly. "Bullies want you to feel small. They want you to believe they have more power than they do." His expression turned serious. "But the second you realize they only have as much power as you give them, that's when everything changes." Ryan thought about that. About how many times he had let people take his power. How many times he had let himself feel small. Jordan's voice was steady. "What happened back there? That wasn't just about you. It wasn't just about some security guard on a power trip. It was about a system that lets people like him get away with it because no one expects people like us to fight back." Ryan inhaled slowly. "But you do." Jordan nodded. "I do. And so can you." Ryan let those words settle. Could he? He had spent his whole life trying to stay invisible, trying to avoid moments exactly like this one. But for the first time, he realized something. The moment had come anyway, and he had survived it. Jordan glanced toward a nearby coffee shop. "Come on, let's sit for a minute." Ryan followed him inside, the smell of fresh espresso filling the air. Jordan ordered 2 drinks, and they sat near the window, the tension from earlier still lingering but fading. Ryan stared at the cup in his hands, his mind still circling back to what had happened. "What do we do now?" Jordan took a sip of his coffee, then looked at Ryan with a knowing smile. "Now, we make sure this never happens again." Ryan's fingers tightened around his coffee cup as he let Jordan's words sink in. "We make sure this never happens again." For so long, he had told himself that incidents like what happened with Miller were just a part of life, something to endure, to move past, to forget as quickly as possible. But Jordan's confidence, the way he had turned the situation around so effortlessly, made Ryan wonder if maybe, just maybe, he had been looking at it all wrong. Ryan glanced up. "How?" Jordan leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "First, we make sure people know about what happened today." Ryan stiffened. "Wait, like post about it?" Jordan nodded. "Yeah, not just for you, but for everyone else who's been through the same thing. The reason people like Miller think they can get away with this is because most people don't speak up. They count on silence." Ryan hesitated. The thought of putting himself out there like that made his stomach twist. He had spent his whole life trying not to be a spectacle. He had fought so hard just to exist without making waves. But today, he had made one. And it hadn't destroyed him. He exhaled. "What if people think I'm overreacting?" Jordan tilted his head. "Overreacting to being publicly humiliated by a grown man on a power trip?" Ryan looked away. "I mean, it's not like he hit me or anything. It was just words." Jordan's jaw tightened. "Ryan, those just words are what make people feel like they don't belong. Like they have to constantly defend their own existence. That's not small." Ryan swallowed. He hated that Jordan was right. Jordan leaned forward. "Look, I'm not saying you have to make some viral post or go to the press. But sharing your story? Speaking up? That's how change happens." And if people like Miller know there are consequences to their actions, they'll think twice before they do it to someone else. Ryan nodded slowly, the idea settling in his mind. Could he really do this? Could he really take something awful and turn it into something powerful? Jordan pulled out his phone. I can help you draft something. It doesn't have to be dramatic, just the truth. Ryan hesitated, then took a deep breath. Okay. Jordan smiled. Good. And after that? We make sure the mall knows this won't fly. Ryan's eyes widened. Wait, you mean? Jordan smirked. You think this is the first time Miller has done this? You think you're the only person he's singled out? Ryan hadn't thought about that. But now that he did, he realized. Jordan was probably right. Miller had been too comfortable. Too quick to smirk, to mock, to assume no one would challenge him.
And that meant this wasn't just about Ryan. Jordan sat back. I know people on the mall's board. A couple of them are real big on public image. He smiled knowingly. They won't love the idea of being associated with discrimination. Ryan's heart pounded. This was moving fast. Faster than he had ever thought possible. But deep down, past the nerves, past the fear, felt right. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't just enduring something. He was fighting back. Ryan took a deep breath, looked Jordan in the eye, and nodded. Let's do it. Jordan's smile widened, but there was no gloating, no superiority, just a quiet understanding. He knew what this moment meant for Ryan. All right, Jordan said, sliding his phone across the table. We'll start small. Just a post, your words, your experience. No need to make it flashy or dramatic. Ryan hesitated before picking up the phone. His fingers hovered over the screen, a swirl of emotions tightening in his chest. He had never done something like this before. He had never spoken up. His whole life, he had been taught to let things slide. Ignore the comments. Laugh it off. Don't make it worse. But today, he had learned something new. Silence didn't make things better. It made them worse. He took a slow breath, then started typing. Today, I went to the mall just to enjoy my day. Instead, I got stopped by a security guard who looked at my ID and laughed, in front of strangers, for no reason except to make me feel small. It's not the first time something like this has happened, but today, something different did happen. Someone stood up for me, and for the first time, I realized I don't have to just take it. None of us do. He stopped, reading the words over. Felt real. He glanced up at Jordan, who nodded. That's good. That's really good. Ryan swallowed, then hit post. Just like that, it was out in the world. His truth no longer locked inside of him. He expected to feel panic, regret, but instead all he felt was relief. Jordan took his phone back, leaning back in his chair. Now we wait. Ryan exhaled, trying to ground himself. His hands still felt shaky, but the more he sat with the moment, the more he realized. He wasn't scared anymore. He had been terrified of being seen. But being seen wasn't the problem. The problem was that people like Miller counted on people like him being too afraid to fight back. Not anymore. Jordan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and smirked. That was fast. Ryan frowned. What? Jordan turned the phone so Ryan could see. The post was already gaining traction. Likes, shares, comments. Some were supportive. You're not alone. I've been through this too. Glad you spoke up. Security guards always abuse their power. Time for change. Some were dismissive. Oh, so now every security guard is a villain? Give me a break. And some were exactly what Ryan had expected. Crybaby playing victim. Grow up. Ryan exhaled, his hands tightening around his coffee cup. I knew there'd be people like that. Jordan shrugged. Of course. But you don't post for them. You post for the people who needed to see it. Ryan stared at the screen. More notifications popped up. The number of people seeing his story kept climbing. It was working. For the first time, he wasn't just someone something bad had happened to. He was someone doing something about it. Jordan smiled. Now, he said, tapping his phone, let's talk about Miller's future at that mall. Ryan's breath caught. This was just the beginning. Ryan's heart pounded as he stared at the growing number of notifications. It wasn't just a post anymore, it was a movement. People were engaging, sharing their own experiences, adding their voices to something bigger than just him. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't alone. Jordan leaned back in his chair, watching the screen with an approving nod. See? The moment you speak up, people start listening. Ryan swallowed hard, still trying to process it all. Yeah, but what happens now? Jordan's expression darkened slightly. Now, we make sure people with real power hear about this. Ryan hesitated. You mean, the mall? Jordan smirked. Exactly. Ryan glanced around, as if the walls of the coffee shop could somehow hear them. How do we even do that? Jordan set his phone down on the table. I told you, I know people. The board of directors, the higher-ups, they don't like bad press. And you? He gestured toward Ryan's phone. You just handed them a PR nightmare. Ryan's pulse quickened. So, what do we do? Jordan sat forward. First, we get people talking. The more noise we make, the more pressure there is for them to respond. If enough people start tagging the mall's official account, their PR team will have no choice but to acknowledge this. Ryan still wasn't used to thinking like this. He had never considered that his voice could hold weight. But Jordan made it sound so simple, so possible. Jordan tapped his phone screen, already drafting a message. I'm going to reach out to a few reporters, see if they want to cover this. Local news outlets love a good discrimination story. If they pick this up, it'll be everywhere. Ryan stiffened. Wait, news. Jordan gave him a calm look. You don't have to do interviews. Just let them tell the story. The more eyes on this, the faster the mall has to react. Ryan's fingers curled around his coffee cup. And what if they don't? Jordan smirked. Oh, they will. Ryan wasn't sure if it was hope or fear that made his stomach tighten. And what about Miller? Jordan's expression cooled. That depends on how smart he is. Ryan swallowed. You think he's worried? Jordan leaned back. Oh, he's more than worried. He's in damage control mode right now. Ryan wasn't used to being the one in control. The idea that Miller, the man who had humiliated him without a second thought, was now the one feeling pressure was surreal. And it felt good. Jordan watched him carefully. It's okay to enjoy this, you know. Ryan looked up. Enjoy what? Justice, Jordan said simply. Standing up for yourself. Making people like him answer for what they do. Ryan took a deep breath. Maybe Jordan was right. Maybe, for once, it was okay to fight back. And if Miller thought he could just laugh it off and move on, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. Ryan sat back, his pulse still racing as Jordan's words settled over him. Justice. Standing up. Making them answer. For so long, he had been on the other side of things. He had been the one ignored, dismissed, talked over. But now people were listening. The post was spreading. The comments kept climbing. Some were encouraging, some were dismissive, and some were from people who had their own Miller stories. Ryan scrolled through them, heart tightening. This happened to me at my school. I got kicked out of a store for using the wrong restroom. Security made me leave a restaurant because they didn't want trouble. There were dozens of them. People who had been through exactly what he had. Jordan leaned over to glance at the screen. See? It's never just about one person. Ryan inhaled deeply. I didn't realize how many people this happens to. Jordan nodded. That's why people like Miller get away with it. Because most of the time, no one says anything. They assume it's just them, or that speaking up won't change anything. Ryan swallowed hard. But it can. Jordan's smirk returned. Oh, it definitely can.
Ryan set his phone down, fingers still trembling slightly. What do we do next? Jordan tapped his own phone. I've already reached out to a few people. A reporter from a major news site just messaged back. Ryan's stomach flipped. Already? Jordan grinned. Told you, people love a story like this. The more pressure we put on the mall, the faster they'll be forced to take action. Ryan exhaled, trying to process everything. This was happening so fast. Yesterday, he had been just another kid trying to get through life without making waves. Today, he was the wave. Jordan checked his phone again and smirked. Looks like the mall just released a statement. Ryan's breath caught. What? Already? Jordan turned the screen so he could see. It was a bland, carefully worded response. The kind of statement that meant nothing but was designed to sound apologetic. We take all guest experiences seriously and are committed to fostering a welcoming environment for everyone. We are currently reviewing the situation and will take appropriate action. Ryan frowned. That's it? Jordan chuckled. Of course, they're trying to ride this out with the least amount of effort. No direct apology, no real commitment to change. Just corporate nonsense. Ryan felt his frustration bubbling. So they don't actually care? Jordan shook his head. They care about optics. They'll do as little as possible unless they're forced to do more. Ryan exhaled sharply. Then we force them? Jordan's grin widened. Now you're getting it? Ryan sat up straighter. How? Jordan's eyes gleamed. We push harder. We make them care. We make sure this doesn't just go away quietly. Ryan's nerves twisted, but underneath them, something else stirred. Determination. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just waiting for things to get better. He was making them better. And if the mall thought their weak statement was enough, they were about to find out just how wrong they were. Ryan's pulse quickened as he stared at the weak, carefully sanitized statement from the mall. It wasn't enough, not even close. It was the kind of response that meant nothing, the kind that let people like Miller walk away with zero consequences. And Ryan was done letting that happen. Jordan leaned back in his chair, watching him closely. So, what's the next move? Ryan swallowed. You tell me. You're the expert at this. Jordan smirked. I am. But this is your fight, Ryan. You decide how far we take it? Ryan hesitated. He had spent so long avoiding attention, avoiding fights like this. But if he let this go, if he backed down now, what was the point of any of it? He clenched his jaw. I want them to actually do something. Not just release a statement. I want them to change their policy. I want Miller to be held accountable. Jordan's smirk widened. Good. Because that's exactly what we're gonna make happen. Ryan's heart pounded, but this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from purpose. Jordan tapped his phone screen. I already reached out to the local news station. They're interested. But we can push harder. Ryan's stomach flipped. How? Jordan leaned in. We escalate. We put faces to the stories. You saw the comments on your post. This isn't just about you. We make sure people know this is a pattern. Ryan nodded slowly. You mean get other people to speak up? Jordan nodded. Exactly. We find more people who've had experiences like this. We build momentum. Ryan exhaled. The idea of leading something this big was terrifying. But it also felt right. For years, he had stayed silent, hoping things would get better. But now, he was done waiting. He picked up his phone and started typing. If you've ever been discriminated against like this, at a mall, a store, anywhere, I want to hear your story. The more we speak up, the harder it is for them to ignore us. He hit post. Within minutes, the responses started rolling in. Ryan's chest tightened. This wasn't just his story anymore. It was so much bigger. Jordan watched the screen, a satisfied look on his face. Now, he said, leaning back, we see just how much pressure it takes before they finally break. Ryan took a deep breath. He wasn't sure how this would end. But for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid to find out. The flood of responses was overwhelming. Ryan stared at his phone as the notifications stacked higher and higher, people sharing their own experiences, their own stories of humiliation, exclusion, and mistreatment. Security threw me out last year because I'd made customers uncomfortable. A store refused to let me try on clothes because they only had women's sizes. A manager asked me if I was really who I said I was, right in front of other shoppers. Each story made Ryan's chest tighten. He had always known he wasn't the only one going through this. But seeing it like this, hundreds of voices joining his, felt like a tidal wave. Jordan nodded as he scrolled through the messages. This is good. This is what we need. Ryan exhaled sharply. It's also a lot. Jordan looked up. You okay? Ryan hesitated. The truth was he didn't know. A part of him still felt the urge to step back, to let someone else take the lead. He had spent so much time just trying to exist without confrontation, and now, suddenly, he was at the center of something bigger than he had ever imagined. But another part of him, the part that was sick of staying silent, felt something else. Purpose. He met Jordan's eyes and nodded. Yeah. I just didn't expect it to be this big. Jordan smirked. Welcome to activism. Ryan let out a small, nervous laugh. So, what now? Jordan leaned forward. Now we push harder. He pointed at Ryan's phone. You already have momentum. Now we make them feel it. Ryan frowned. How? Jordan grinned. We call them out directly. Ryan's stomach twisted. Like, the mall? Jordan nodded. Exactly. Tag them. Demand a real response. Get other people to do the same. They can ignore one post, but they can't ignore an entire movement. Ryan swallowed hard. His hands felt slightly shaky as he opened a new post. He hesitated, then started typing. The mall's statement wasn't enough. Empty words don't fix real discrimination. We want real policy changes. We want accountability. We want answers. At Westgate Mall, what are you going to do about it? He hit post. Jordan grinned. Perfect. Ryan set his phone down, exhaling. And now? Jordan smirked. Now we wait. But not for long. Within minutes, the retweets, shares, and comments exploded. People were tagging the mall's account, demanding a response. Some were local activists, some were just regular people who were angry. And then, Jordan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and raised an eyebrow. Well, that didn't take long. Ryan sat up. What? Jordan turned the phone so Ryan could see. Westgate Mall had responded. We take these concerns seriously and will be reaching out privately to discuss next steps. Ryan's pulse quickened. That's something, right? Jordan chuckled. It's them panicking. They don't want this to get bigger. That's why they're trying to take it private. Ryan frowned. So what do we do? Jordan smirked. We keep it public. Ryan exhaled sharply. You mean we don't let them bury it? Jordan nodded. Exactly. We make them fix it, where everyone can see. Ryan stared at the phone, heart racing. He had never imagined himself doing something like this. But now, he wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for everyone. Ryan's pulse quickened as he stared at the mall's response. We take these concerns seriously and will be reaching out privately. It was classic damage control. The kind of response meant to calm the fire, not put it out. Jordan scoffed. They think if they move this conversation behind closed doors, it'll go away. He looked at Ryan. You ready to make sure that doesn't happen? Ryan swallowed hard. The logical part of him, the part that had spent years trying to stay under the radar, told him to accept the mall's offer, let them handle it quietly and move on. But then he thought about Miller. The way he had laughed. The way he had enjoyed humiliating him. The way it was so normal to him, so easy. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every single person who had been through this and stayed silent because they thought no one would listen. Ryan clenched his jaw, grabbed his phone, and started typing. No, we won't let this happen behind closed doors. This isn't just about me. It's about everyone who has faced this kind of discrimination. We want action. We want policy changes. We want real accountability. And we won't stop until we get it. At Westgate Mall, what's your next move? He hit post. Jordan grinned. Now you're playing the game. Ryan exhaled, hands still trembling slightly. You think they'll respond? Jordan smirked. They won't have a choice. And he was right. Within minutes, the post was everywhere. People were retweeting it, tagging the mall, demanding real action. News outlets started picking up the story, reporters reaching out for interviews. Influencers and activists began amplifying the message. And then, the first real crack. Jordan's phone buzzed, and when he looked at the screen, his smirk widened. Oh, this is getting good. Ryan leaned in. What? Jordan turned the screen to show him. Westgate Mall had just announced an emergency internal review of their security policies. Ryan's breath caught. You think that's real, or just more PR nonsense? Jordan shrugged. Doesn't matter. They're reacting. That means they feel the pressure. Ryan sat back, trying to process it all. A few hours ago, Miller had treated him like he didn't matter. But the entire mall was scrambling to save their reputation. Jordan leaned in. We're not done yet. This is the moment when we push even harder. Ryan nodded, a newfound determination settling in his chest. Then let's do it. Because now, for the first time, he wasn't just fighting back. He was winning. Ryan could barely believe what was happening. Hours ago, he had been just another kid getting humiliated by security. But now, the entire mall was scrambling to save face. His phone was buzzing nonstop. Reporters asking for interviews, activists amplifying his story, strangers offering their support. It was surreal, overwhelming, but also empowering. Jordan leaned back, arms crossed, watching everything unfold. This is what happens when you don't let them sweep it under the rug. Ryan exhaled sharply, gripping his phone. So what now? Do we wait for the mall to actually do something? Jordan smirked. No. We make sure they have to. Ryan's pulse quickened. How? Jordan tapped his screen. We take this offline. Public pressure is great, but real change happens when you show up. Ryan frowned. Show up? Like in person? Jordan nodded. A protest? Ryan's breath caught. A protest? Jordan grinned. Think about it. We already have people supporting this online. If we organize a peaceful demonstration outside the mall, make the issue impossible to ignore, they'll be forced to do more than just review their policies. Ryan swallowed hard. He had never imagined himself leading something like this. Speaking up online had been one thing, but standing outside the mall, in front of everyone, making a scene? That was another level. Jordan seemed to read his hesitation. Look, I'm not saying you have to grab a megaphone and lead the crowd. But your story is what started all of this. If people see you there, standing up for yourself, it sends a message. Ryan took a shaky breath. And what if no one shows up? Jordan laughed. Trust me, they will. Ryan hesitated. The old version of himself, the one who wanted to stay invisible, avoid trouble, keep his head down, was screaming at him to say no. But then he thought about Miller. About every time he had been ignored, laughed at, dismissed. And about how, for the first time, people were listening. He looked up at Jordan and nodded. Let's do it. Jordan grinned. Good. Because I already made the flyer. Ryan blinked. Wait, what? Jordan turned his phone around, showing a clean, simple digital flyer with bold text. Stand up against discrimination. Join us this Saturday at Westgate Mall. Change starts here. Ryan's stomach flipped. It was real. Jordan smirked. Told you. You're not the only one who wants change. Ryan took a deep breath. This was happening. For the first time, he wasn't just reacting. He was taking action. And this time, the mall wouldn't be able to ignore him. Ryan stared at the flyer on Jordan's phone, his stomach twisting with nerves. This wasn't just a post. It was real. A protest. A physical presence. People showing up because of what happened to him. His fingers clenched around his phone. What if this backfires? Jordan shrugged. Then we adapt. But trust me, it won't. Ryan exhaled sharply. Trusting wasn't easy. His whole life, he had been taught that speaking up only made things harder. But what if Jordan was right? What if, this time, things actually changed? Jordan tapped his screen. I'm posting this now. It'll spread fast. Ryan's pulse pounded as he watched Jordan hit post. The internet exploded. Finally, people are standing up to this. I'll be there. Westgate better start panicking. Ryan's breath caught. It was happening. People were sharing the flyer, tagging news outlets, calling for justice. Jordan glanced up. We need to make sure we control the narrative. You good with talking to the press? Ryan hesitated. I don't know. Jordan nodded. That's fine. I'll handle the bigger interviews. You can just be present. That alone speaks louder than words. Ryan exhaled. And what if Miller shows up? Jordan smirked. Then he gets to watch a crowd of people hold him accountable. Ryan let out a nervous laugh. The thought of facing Miller again made his stomach turn, but something was different now. Ryan wasn't alone. Jordan's phone buzzed, and he checked the screen. His smirk widened. And just like that, we've got our first headline. Ryan swallowed hard. Already? Jordan turned the screen to show him. Discrimination at Westgate Mall sparks protest. Advocates call for immediate policy changes. Ryan's breath caught. It was real. Jordan sat back, looking satisfied. Now we wait. And when Saturday comes? His eyes gleamed. We make history. Ryan's fingers trembled slightly, but for the first time, it wasn't fear. It was power. Because this time, he wasn't just a victim. He was leading the fight.